Doctors dismissed this little girl's symptoms, but days later she uttered 3 words before dying.
Before we begin, do us a favor and click that like button. Also subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to be inspired by these inspiring stories every day.
Elspeth Moore lays in her bed while her father, Stephen, lays on the floor. His little girl's sick, so he stays by her side in the hope that she gets some rest. In just a few minutes, though, he'll hear her take her last breaths. But before that moment, she says her final 3 words, and it's a heartbreaking statement to say the least. After that, Elspeth's parents took her to see a doctor who in turn suggested they go to a hospital. Their daughter, it seems, had a fever and was dehydrated. Emergency room doctors then diagnosed the 5-year-old with a virus. They suggested giving her small amounts of water every few minutes and observing how much she could stomach. After that, the Moore family went home, and things seemed to be turning around for Elspeth. Stephen admitted at a 2019 inquest she was starting to come out of it. Even the next day, when the little girl's symptoms made a final resurgence, the couple felt that it was just the virus's last stand as it left her body. Elspeth's parents remember their daughter with a multitude of adjectives. Her father, Stephen, said she was effervescent during a 2019 inquest. Meanwhile, her mother called the little girl beautiful and bright on her Just Giving page. She also described her daughter as building a legacy of kindness and humor, even in 5 short years of life. As anyone with kids can imagine, losing Elspeth left the Moore family completely devastated, her mother wrote. The little girl's death came as a shock, even though she'd been sick for the 10 days leading up to it. Her parents recalled her feeling ill in the midst of a summer heatwave and blamed her sickness on the extra warm weather. Elspeth's lethargy then gave way to a stomachache, but she still went to school after the weekend ended. On Monday, June 25, 2018, the preschool called her mom and asked if she'd pick the little girl up as she'd come down with diarrhea. So she retrieved the youngster from Little Wren's. And the next day, the worried mother took her to a doctor. This, of course, came as welcome news to Stephen and his wife, he admitted. At the inquest into Elspeth's death, he said, "Given that, when we arrived, we were freaking out, for want of a better word, to be told she had a virus, I felt quite relieved and happy to go based on that." Nevertheless, on July 5th, Elspeth's symptoms worsened once again. This time, she couldn't keep anything down, a typical symptom of gastroenteritis. But Stephen and his wife didn't worry too much about the 5-year-old's vomiting. Instead, they believed that this was the virus rearing its ugly head one last time. Still, when Elspeth went to bed that night, Stephen made a point to check on his daughter every 30 minutes, since she'd been sick all day. His 11 p.m. checkup revealed that the little one was awake, so he told the 5-year-old that he'd lay beside her bed on the bedroom floor. Stephen then said to Elspeth, "Do you want to sit up, darling?" When he moved her body, though, it became clear that something was urgently wrong with the 5-year-old. He said, "I sat her up," at which point her head just flopped back and her eyes rolled up. So he began to administer CPR immediately. Paramedics rushed to the Moore's home and they continued CPR on the way to Southampton General Hospital. Staffers there tried it too, but the efforts to revive Elspeth didn't work. Doctors pronounced the 5-year-old dead a mere hours after her father had come in to shut off her bedroom lights. Experts do not know the purpose that the appendix serves in the body. They also have no idea exactly why it can start to swell. But sometimes a blockage to the entrance of the appendix can be all it takes for this approximately 4-inch pouch to develop a painful condition known as appendicitis. In most cases, appendicitis begins with intermittent pain in the center of the abdomen. It only takes a few hours for that ache to travel to the bottom right of the area. That's where the appendix resides. Then the pain becomes constant and more intense. Pressing this abdominal zone makes it feel even worse. Elspeth's case mimicked that of many others who have suffered appendicitis, including diarrhea due to the swollen abdominal pouch. However, she didn't have the telltale ache in the bottom right of her stomach. And that's because the 5-year-old's appendix sat in an abnormal position. So doctors didn't suspect Elspeth had appendicitis, which gave her appendix time to swell, burst, and cause a painful case of peritonitis. Without treatment, the infection gave way to sepsis, a condition sparked as her body tried to fight off the peritonitis. But it responded with a chemically imbalanced defense that hurt more than it helped. Dr. Hawkins went on to defend her decision-making process in terms of treating Elspeth's dehydration. Indeed, some wondered why she didn't put the child on a drip. She reiterated, We made a plan to do a fluid challenge. It's a structured way of making an assessment of whether a child needs extra fluids. On top of that, Dr. Hawkins had to speak on her choice to allow the Moores to take Elspeth home instead of keeping her overnight for observation. She couldn't, however, necessarily defend such a move. Instead, she said, "With retrospect, should I have encouraged them to stay? Maybe. It's a very tricky situation." At the inquest, though, Elspeth's mom challenged this notion. She said Dr. Hawkins didn't give them enough information. Namely, she didn't know that the physician wanted to lead a second round of observations. The grieving mother said, "We were caring parents. We knew something was wrong and we would have stayed." Obviously, the decision to stay or go became clearer to the Moores in hindsight. At the inquest, Stephen said, "At no point was it ever mentioned to us that the diagnosis could potentially be appendicitis. If we had known this was even a possibility, then we would have obviously stayed." Of course, this tragedy also affected the staff at the medical institution where it took place. Peter Wilson, who serves as a clinical director for the University Hospital Southampton's Women's and Children's Services, publicly said as much. After the inquest into Elspeth's death, he also vowed to use her loss to improve the facility's practice. It would be yet another legacy for the bright, bubbly 5-year-old to leave behind, one that might save lives in the future. The world is filled with stories going viral every single day. But how many of these sites can you actually follow? We understand that your day should start with positive stories, stories that resonate with you. And so we started JoJo Stories. Our mission is to create meaningful stories that cover everything from animals to anthropology, history to environment and lifestyle. The kind of content you read on our site will be one you'll want to share with your family and friends. We hope you'll join our growing family and be part of our community. Welcome to JoJo Stories, jojostories.com.